So begins our awesome presentation on the early Greeks, created by 7th period, the best period ever. First off, we will hear about
geography of ancient Greece.
Be like close.
They made a living from the sea because of bad farming conditions in most of Greece. They became sailors, fishers, and traders. Greece mountains and rocky soil was not ideal for farming. The mountains and seas played a great role in Greek history.
The communities were independent because of mountains and seas dividing them. As you can see, the people had to ride in boats to get to the other islands. At the top right, you can see the mountains separating them from others. On the bottom right, you can see the water surrounding the islands inland.
Mainland Greece is a peninsula surrounded by hundreds of islands offshore. To the west is Ionian Sea, to the south is the Mediterranean Sea, to the east is the Aegean Sea. The islands offshore stretch all the way to Asia.
The areas with mild climates could be farmed for wheat, barley, olives, and grapes. They became fishers, sailors, and traders, and they also raised sheep and goats in early Greece.
Awesome. So now we're going to hear about the Minoans. Be close to this. Press this when you're ready to go.
The Minoans earned wealth by trading. Hence, they weren't Greek, even though that they arose in Greece.
The Minoans collapsed in 1514 BC, or 1550 BC. Theories state that earthquakes caused tsunamis or other Greeks raided them. The Minoans also built ships from cedar and oak wood, kept the sea free of pirates.
So next we're going to hear about the Mycenaeans, who came after the Minoans.
The first Mycenaean ruler was Alexander the First.
The Mycenaeans are named after a city-state of Mycenae, a palace city and one of the most powerful of the Mycenaean city-states.
The warriors were the most premier warriors of their time. They were very clever and used clever tactics.
In the 1800s, a German amateur archaeologist by the name of Heinrich Schliemann was convinced that the Trojans and Achaeans actually existed.
So next we're going to learn about the interactions between the Minoans and the Mycenaeans. You have to talk close to this.
The Mycenaeans lived just across the water from the Minoans, so they could easily interact. And so through the trade, they used their religion and their way of building ships and bronze.
The Mycenaeans beat the Minoans out in war. The Mycenaeans were great battlers. You may know the biggest battle, the Trojan War. The Minoans taught the Mycenaeans how to navigate with stars and the sun.
Next, we have the Greek Dark Age, ranging from 11,000 BC, 1100 BC to 750 BC.
At the start of the Dark Ages, the Mycenaean civilization collapsed. Since they weren't able to do as much trade, poverty started spreading.
After that, the Greeks then started to forget their own language that they wrote.
The Dorians, another civilization, brought advanced weapons to Greece made of iron.
By then, the Greek created a new way of writing that made it easier to write with. The letters that they used was a new alphabet that consisted of 24 letters.
Greece Colonies by Case, Sammy, and Zared. The arrow is pointing at where Greece arose, which brings us to our next slide. With more and more people to feed, they had to get more farmable land to create the crops to feed these people.
Expanding Greece. As the Greeks traded with other civilizations, they brought their culture along with them, spreading their language and writing. Minting coins. When people spread it out and formed colonies, they still traded goods with their parent city, and artisans began accepting coins for their goods instead of other goods.
So artisans needed to uphold their supply and demand for their product, or they used jars as their product most of the time, and it was used mostly for decorations, and it was also used for storage of food and water and such. And so that's why on some Greek jars, that's why some people have pots on their heads, and they're usually by a supply of water.
So next we'll hear from our experts who are going to explain the polis, which was the center of Greek life, and they're going to explain to you how it was set up and what its purpose was. Lean close.
So polis structure, as you see here in the image as text, it was contained in a city-state and more. This is more like France and Germany than Florida structure-wise. Now think in silence. Is Florida like that? Like a city structure? The answer is no.
This is more like France and Germany than Alabama and Florida. As you see here, this is a refuge that had safety and care.
Citizenship was developed in these city-states by being crossed off and then them socializing.
So next, we'll hear about what citizenship means in the context of Greece, because they're the first ones to invent this idea of citizenship.
From the Greeks' point of view, the city-state was made up of their land, and it was their responsibility to run it. So because the citizens lived in this land, the Greeks thought that it was their responsibility to run it.
Women and children could qualify for citizenship, but didn't have the same rights as men. They didn't think anyone else should be citizen.
They didn't think it was right for anyone but men to have citizenship, because in a lot of ancient times, women and children didn't have the same rights that men did, and so the Greeks thought it was right for men to have these rights to be a citizen, but these men had to be wealthy and own land, and they had to be native born.
Change isn't always a bad thing. When military in Greece changed, hoplites, which were ordinary citizens, got to take part in armies.
The Greeks were also the first group of people to come up with the idea of citizenship.
So last but certainly not least, we have our final group who's going to talk about the citizen soldiers of ancient Greece and how the people who served in the army changed over time in ancient Greece.
Wars were waged by nobles riding horses and chariots. Military systems were changed. Horses were used to transport things, carried wounded soldiers, and also carry to weapons and articles. Was a light vehicle on two wheels. A chariot was on two wheels, drawn by one or two horses, and was used for the supreme military weapon. The chariot was also used for hunting and contests. Hoplites made good soldiers. Hoplites were citizen soldiers of ancient Greek city-states who were also primarily armed with spears and shields. City-states with its surrounded territory forms city-states. Took pride fighting for city-states' hometown loyalties, divided Greeks, and caused distrust for one another.
Imagine if you have 3 sports teams and you suddenly expected them to all start fighting together or to playing together. It might be awkward because they're loyal to their own team. That's how the Greeks were. They were loyal to their own city-states. So when they had to unify and work together, it was sometimes difficult and they would distrust each other.